We all need to wash. It's one of those facts of life. And that extends to all creatures, including our beloved furry friends. But while bathing your cat might seem simple enough, it's important to know as much about it as you can. To wash away the mystery, you could say. These are 8 questions about bathing your cat that it's important to know the answer to. 1. Should you bathe your cat at all? Compared to dogs, cats have a reputation for being low-maintenance pets. And while that is not 100% true, there are a few ways in which they are less effort than dogs. One major way is that they wash themselves. Every day, without fail, our gorgeous fluffy friends settle in for a good old-fashioned wash, licking themselves until they are nice and clean. So, that raises a big question. If they give themselves baths, should we bathe them at all? Annoyingly, there are some contradictions on this front. Some experts claim that you don't need to bathe your cat, except in specific medical situations, or because they are especially dirty. And that can lead to situations too messy for their own tongue and paws to cope with. If they have a particularly nasty infection of fleas, is another good time to give them a wash. On a quick side note, if you do have to wash your cat as they have excessive fleas and you notice the bathwater turning red, don't panic. This is totally normal. It isn't because your special little friend is bleeding. Flea dirt is basically a digested blood, so as that is washed off and goes into the water, it will look kind of scary, but it is totally fine. But in all my digging for research, I found a few people and sites that disagree. Most notably purina.co.uk, who recommend quite regular bathing. More details on how frequently they suggest in just a moment. Ultimately, it's best to take it on a case-by-case basis. You know your cat better than anyone. Are they very indoorsy and always licking their fur? Well then, they're not living the kind of lifestyle that will lead to excess dirt and are cleaning themselves anyway, so it's fine to skip the baths. But are they very outdoorsy and don't seem to wash themselves that much? Well then, regular bathing help from you might be a necessity. 2. How often should you bathe your cat? So some people say you have to bathe your cat, but how often should you be doing it according to them? We might need to bathe or shower roughly once a day, but if a cat has a whole extra system on the go, in the form of licking themselves clean, surely we don't have to bathe them too often. The general recommendation, and this comes from the National Cat Groomers Institution, so you know it's good advice, is once every 4-6 weeks. Though you can of course make exceptions in extreme cases. If your cat has been rolling around in mud but it's only been 2 days since their last bath, don't wait a whole month. That'd be crazy. But while I have mentioned it's best to base it on the specifics of your cat, that only you know, the caveat is age. Sadly, the more senior a cat is, the more they might struggle to look after themselves. Elderly cats will need more assistance. If your cat is on the more senior end of the spectrum, it might be worth watching them when they wash themselves to see if they appear to be struggling at all, or just checking them now and then to see how clean they are. If their fur isn't quite as spring fresh as it used to be when they were young, they might now need you to bathe them more frequently than you used to, as they can't quite do it themselves anymore. 3. Can bathing be harmful to cats? Given how much of a fuss they can cause, how much they can kick off at times, you might think a bath is extraordinarily painful for a cat. They meow to their heart's content, possibly even scratching at you and attempting to squirm away. But is it actually harmful? Or are they just kicking up a fuss like a toddler trying to avoid vegetables? The good news is, it's not physically painful, but due to many cats having a fear of water, more on that a little later, the anxiety can be emotionally and mentally painful. Having said that it causes no physical harm, and they are causing a fuss over nothing, the silly little ragamuffins, there are a few negative side effects to bathing your furball. Notably, bathing them too often can actually dry out their skin, which will reduce the number of natural oils in their fur. This can lead to long-term irritation and discomfort. So, while the bath itself isn't harmful, the long-term effects of bathing too frequently can be so. That is something to be aware of. 4. What are some common mistakes when bathing cats? Nobody can get everything right every time. You will have made some silly mistakes when bathing your cats. We all will have. Using water that is too hot is a common error, but when some cat owners hear that they swing too far the other way and use water that's too cold, and that's just as bad. Lukewarm is the way to go. In addition, using cat-specific shampoo is vital, as the chemicals in human shampoo can greatly irritate a cat's poor skin. Another common mistake isn't in how people bathe their cat, but how they dry them. You might want to be done fast. You might want to make sure your poor fluffy friend isn't too wet, too cold for too long, so you might dry them as fast as you can, ruffling and scrubbing them with a towel. But being gentle is better than being fast. Take your time to dry them, slow and gentle instead of fast and rough, and ensure they are thoroughly dry, no matter how long it takes, because wet fur can be very uncomfortable. Which leads us to our next question. 5. Do cats really hate water? There are a few stereotypes about cats we all know. One of those is that they hate water. There is some truth to this. There are some possibilities as to why. A few are obvious, such as a general dislike of being cold or fear of drowning. But one other theory as to why most cats dislike water comes from their ancestry. We all have quirks and habits that we don't quite realize are backed into our DNA from our ancestors, and one theory suggests this also affects cats. Back when they were wild animals, if a cat was out in the wilderness and soaking wet, their fur would be heavier. This would have been a huge issue for a wild cat, because how do you chase prey if you've doubled in weight? How do you escape a predator if you've lost your nimbleness? Modern house cats might still hate being wet, because somewhere in their biology is the idea that being wet means they are not fast enough to eat or escape being eaten. Regardless of how true this may or may not be, being soaked through can be very unpleasant for cats. Think of yourself. If you've been caught in a heavy rainstorm, it feels incredibly uncomfortable the way your soaked clothes cling to you, even adding extra weight. It's awful, but when you get home, you can take those clothes off and swap them. A poor cat can't just rip off their fur and hang it on the radiator. Sorry to put that image in your head. So, that irritable feeling if they're wet can't be easily shaken off. 6. What are some life hacks for bathing cats? Trying to bathe a cat that doesn't like water can be as chaotic as trying to build a Jenga tower in a tornado. Thankfully, there's a lot of great advice out there for hacks that can make it simpler. On the website, Anasira, I found some fantastic tips. They suggest the key is to teach your cat that being in water is perfectly safe so long as you are around to look after them. You can even go further and make it enjoyable. One way to do this is to give your cat a treat every bath time so that they come to associate bathing with getting a reward. That treat could be their favorite toy or possibly some food. While it may take a few bath times before this kicks in and works, eventually your cat may well come to associate bath time with treats instead of discomfort and fear. So long as you are patient and committed, you can slowly but surely get your cat used to water. To a cat, being bathed by you isn't necessarily a massive leap from being groomed by you in other ways. If you groom your cat on a regular basis, they will come to know that they are safe with you in that kind of activity. So when an inevitable bath time rears its ugly head, they might freak out less than they would. To this end, regularly brushing your cat on a weekly basis for short-haired cats, and possibly as often as daily for long-haired cats, will get them used to being loved and nurtured in that way by you. Not only might this reduce the anxiety they will feel when it is time for a bath, but even if it doesn't work, it's just a great way to bond with them. Several experts go so far as to recommend doing this in the bathroom, building up that association that the bathroom is a safe place to be, somewhere in which they can trust you to look after them. And a common tactic among many cat owners is to, once your cat is used to being brushed by you in the bathroom, experiment with occasional dribbling a splash of water on the brush. Not much, just a few drops. This can hopefully help shake up their poor opinion of water. That may all seem silly given earlier in this video, I mentioned there's no real need to bathe your cat too often. But if yours is an exception, due to being elderly or having a health condition, this is a great tactic to make the more regular bath times easier for both you and your fur baby. But if you're putting all of that work into looking after your little fur ball, why do they disrespect you so often by shoving their butt in your face? Well, guess what? That might actually be the best form of thanks they have to offer. Check out this next video to find out why.